Hello YouTubers, so I wanted to make a quick post here regarding gay rights in specifics, but more generally also about human rights. And I felt the need to do this because I think it's something that a lot of people here in the West assume is this issue that's quite settled, and we've got to a position of a consensus, and so the issues don't really come up for debate as much because we tend to feel like the gay rights movement has secured most of its victories and we've got to a position where we're more or less equal now, and we're beyond the need to discuss the issues, really. But actually, I don't think that that is the case. And the reason for that is that, well, we live in an ever-globalising world, and in different countries, cultures and continents, there are vastly different belief systems and different reactions to homosexuality, actually. And whilst in the West, generally, there's been an increasing acceptance, and in fact, there's now a majority of people, mostly, in favour of it, although there's still a large minority against it. There's other countries in the world where there's still a large majority who are against it. And there are still countries where there are laws prohibiting it, and where it can sometimes be punishable for various violence or imprisonment, and even in rare but extreme cases sometimes even the death penalty. But here in the West, things have changed hugely, and by that I mean Europe and America particularly. And in the 1990s, up till then, the majority of people were against gay rights, mostly. And it was about a 60-40 split. And that position has now switched the other way round. So it's now about 60% for gay rights and about 40% less, 40% against, sorry. And that varies, you know, country to country. But there's really been a big shift in terms of how we view it, and it's become much more acceptable, a much more thing that's seen as being a right that people have, and much less illegal and much less immoral. It's seen as neither a crime nor a sin by many people. So a great majority of people's views here, at least, have changed. I want to talk about the West's view on it first. How I feel that there's dangers of becoming too liberalised on it, and how actually we could possibly have the risk of extending gay rights too far, and that might actually overlap and conflict with the rights of other groups, which also have to be considered, of course. Sometimes we have to weigh up the rights of different groups, you know, because it's all part of the balance of trying to look at human rights in general. So I'm glad that adults had the right today to have a relationship openly with another partner of their own gender, whether it's a male and male or female and female. Something that is between them, is intimate, and something that can either be a bad relationship or a good one. The variety of gay relationships have this whole spectrum of everything from extremely bad to extremely good, and everything in between, of course. So you can't really know the productivity and the nurturing, the goodness of a relationship from its sexuality alone. So I'm glad that people have a right to have that, and there's much more of an increased acceptance for that as well. We see gay pride marches every year. I've been on many of them, and I had gay relationships sometimes, and I felt that in some places it was acceptable, and you were able to talk more openly with some people, some of the time at least. And that brings me on to the gay rights movement in general. And I think that it's become, the last few gay prides I've been to have become much more of a party and a celebration, of course, because so many of those rights have already been won. So it seems like the protest is kind of over in a way, although there's a kind of awareness still that in other countries it hasn't been, and that it isn't still. And there's also an awareness here that there's a minority of people that perhaps in response to those to those victories, that they have hardened their homophobia, in fact. So the resistance to it may have hardened with some people. And so you still see occurrences of homophobia. You still hear about assaults taking place. So it is still something that is of deep concern. And I think we shouldn't assume that the battle is won on that. But at the same time, gay rights, there are a whole range of different rights, and the public, I think, have got a genuine right to be concerned about some things. The big thing that was recently changed, of course, was gay marriage. That followed on from the earlier change of the introduction of the gay civil rights, of the civil partnerships. So civil partnerships recognised a legal binding contract between two gendered couples. And I thought that I supported that, because I thought, actually, to be honest, two partners that want to make a genuine commitment to each other, to sustain the relationship, to keep it monogamous, to make it about love, to make it something that they could live with for years, and something that would help them. I didn't see that that would harm anyone, so I bought into the arguments for it, and I couldn't see any good reason against it. The only real reason to have concern against it is that some people said that wouldn't be the end. That was merely a means to obtaining the gay rights for marriage. And indeed, that turned out to be the case in the end, actually. So they weren't content in the end to end up with a civil partnership. The lobbies then moved on. That was a stepping stone towards the next goal of gay marriage, which they then later secured and now have the legal rights for. And so that brings me neatly on to the real concern that I have, I suppose, and that many conservatives, I think, rightly also have, and many people in society have that concern, that fundamentally marriage is something that really upholds, strengthens, and is the structure that keeps a productive family going. It keeps it secure, and I think it's important to say, of course, not everybody that gets married will have children. No, there are many people that get married that don't, that can't, or choose not to. But nevertheless, for children, a marriage can be a really good thing. It can help strengthen the relationship of the parents themselves, binding them through a contract where they've made a legally binding agreement with each other to sustain that relationship. And of course, there's a good reason to sustain it for the child. Studies show that divorce really has a profound effect upon the child's life, and it really profoundly affects them psychologically. Many psychological studies have shown that it's much better for a child to have two parents that are together, providing that nurture and discipline in a steady family unit together. That being said, of course, we all accept there are occasions when it's probably for the best for parents to split up, when the relationship's broken down so much that it's becoming destructive or abusive, and that it's actually upsetting the child further. And on occasions like that, then we accept it's a good thing for them to be separate, and for them to both still have a role in the child's life, but separately. And we accept that there are many other occasions also when you might have instances where children have one or only one parent, or maybe only see the other parent occasionally. It might be that one parent is very ill, or they're in prison, or they're away, or they're in a war. It might be that they're severely injured, or they're incapacitated. It might be that they've died and the other parent is widowed. And it could be, or they may have their own severe mental health problems and not be in a position where they're able to support and be in touch with the child. So there are a number of different reasons why a child might not be able to have access to both parents. But nevertheless, you know, all research tends to show that a child benefits better when it's got two supportive parents that are together and also both taking a proactive role within the child's development. And I think the real concern about many people is the idea of having a gay couple that are planning to have a child and not to have either the mother, in the case of two gay fathers, or to exclude the role of the father, perhaps in the case of two lesbians. And rather than having a mother and a father figure. I think, you know, tradition dictates that it takes a mother and a father, it takes a male and a female, that is, to procreate, to create the child's life. And that ideally it takes a mother and a father to bring up the child. And I think studies do show that that is the ideal situation and environment to plan for. If you wanted to look at it in terms of the welfare of the child and the child's rights, you would enshrine that as the best goal that we should all be aiming for, to have two supportive, loving parents working together for the benefit of the child. And of course, you know, whether you want to have a child, you know, many people want to have children in life. You know, we've all got our desires. All, you know, there might be someone who's an alcoholic or drug dependent person who wants to have a child, but they also have to think about the welfare of that child and what's in the child's best interests. You can't just let, you know, what your own, you know, desires are. You know, there have to also be considerations for the child too. So I think it's really worth considering and weighing up the rights of gay couples versus the rights also of the child to have access to both parents. And there are good reasons why having both a father and a mother are good for a child. They can both bring and contribute different things. So in terms of having a parent that's providing, that's going out and working, and that's paying the bills, that's meeting the day-to-day provisions, and also setting down the discipline and that. And then, of course, you would want to have a parent also that's providing the emotional support and nourishment, and is there to help with things of homework and hobbies, and to be there when they're watching films, reading books, to find out who their friends are, what their games are they like playing, to get to know about them, to talk with them, and to take an active role in their education as well. So mothers and fathers, you know, may be suited to different roles. In recent years, gender roles have changed a lot. There's been a huge increase in the stay-at-home father, in the housekeeper husband, who is looking after the welfare of the house more, cooking and cleaning. And of course, there's lots of career women now who are going out to work and they're earning the bread and they're meeting those provisions. So the gender roles aren't necessarily the traditional ones that were there. So many people would argue, based on that, that two males, two fathers, could therefore provide that. One of them taking the more effeminate motherly role, and the other one perhaps taking the more masculine role, and thus doing away with the role of the mother altogether, and having a male who is acting as mother, or alternatively having two women who one of them being acting as the father figure. But of course, if you look at it in terms of the child, you know, children are both sexes. One can have a son and a daughter, and they both have different needs as well. And for a father, it's much easier to relate to a son and talk to them about his own personal experiences of going through childhood, going through adolescence, into puberty, and all the risks therein, and about working towards manhood and what it means to be a man from a personal level. You know, it's much easier and for a father, for a man, to actually relate directly to a boy and to talk to him, because he's been through those experiences. He knows what that's like. He knows physically and psychologically and emotionally too. So he can relate to it on a first, you know, on a direct basis. And equally with the mother, that's true as well. You know, she'll be able to talk about her own experiences in terms of things like puberty, in terms of, you know, all sorts of things, you know, periods, for example. So they would have direct personal experience of those things and be able to relate to those. And so I think that we should aim still for that. I mean, I think that there are times, if people are fostering and there are a lack of any good parents who are willing or able to be foster parents, I can quite understand a gay couple could still actually provide a loving, nurturing and disciplined home. I can appreciate that that's quite possible, where the child otherwise might not have access to any sort of home, where they might be in in a sort of institution, for example, where they're supervised by a small number of staff and they don't really have that full-on necessary dedicated level of emotional support that's going to provide that nurturing. So that in itself would be a much better solution. I'm not saying that two gay parents couldn't provide some good level of adequate support, but I am saying I don't think that that would be as ideal as a mother and a father. So well, whether that is classed as homophobic or not, I don't think so personally. I view that as genetics, and I also view that as the result of all the psychological studies that I've read over the years, and from my own experiences, I think, as well. But I think we also need to be wary before judging other people's situations, you know, and why they've made those decisions. It may be that some people want to foster because they do believe that they are providing a really safe, secure and a happy household for a child to thrive in. And we need to look, of course, at whether those claims are true and whether they can live up to those standards. But I do have concerns, though, that if this is something that is normalised and that this could one day in the future become something that happens to a huge extent, we could end up seeing that as becoming the norm, where there could be whole swaths of people, large numbers, that are brought up without any mother. Something that has been considered since ancient times as a sacred relationship. But equally, I would say also the father role is something that is a really sacred relationship too, and something I feel here in the West that we are actually lacking, to be honest. And I think that is a big concern here, that we are lacking fundamentally father figures in many families. And I see that as a critical role in the breakdown of families, and that's had a profound ripple effect on individuals and society as a whole, really. Now, that's a separate but related issue, really. But if we're legislating and to actually remove either the father or the mother role and make that a standard thing, a template to roll out for everyone, I think that is something of deep concern. And I do sympathise and absolutely agree with others that share those concerns as well. But that being said, you know, I think that my position is that I support some gay rights in some areas. And I still think, in terms of gay marriage, I support people's right to make a commitment to each other. And I can understand even fostering a child where that child might either be in an institution or be pushed from one home to another and constantly being moved around different homes. I can see there are occasions, if there's no other choice, where that might be a better solution for them. So I think when you're looking at it, we tend to think as a polemic that we have to accept all gay rights or no gay rights at all. It seems to be an all or nothing sometimes, rather than looking through each of the issues and saying, I might accept some of those on these grounds, but I don't accept these other ones on these grounds. And so I think we need to be cautious about what gay rights we accept and the reasons why that is. And that we don't have to accept them all wholesale as a package deal, you know, or reject them all wholesale, you know. So, I think if we have to do that, that becomes compromising then. We end up having to somehow support things we might not agree with or reject things we might not agree with. And now, I certainly do think that adults do have a right to have a relationship with someone where it's consensual and where it's not harming anyone else, where it's between them, where they're of similar age and compatibility, and where they're not taking advantage of each other. And if they are, it's their own fault. And that's something that, you know, happens in heterosexual relationships too. My other concern, of course, is actually that something that could be taught in schools in terms of taught as something that is I'm okay with it being taught as something that happens because it's something that, you know, objectively does happen, and some people do have those feelings for whatever reasons. And I think it's necessary to talk about the risks of those things as well. You know, you can't really talk about the the potential for good, healthy, wholesome relationship that can provide good sustenance, good support, and companionship. You can't really talk about all that without also talking about the risks of promiscuous sex, of STDs, you know, and also, of course, the risks of destructive relationships, possessive relationships, you know, a whole range of subjects to explore. So I think it's necessary and probably a good thing to explore those. But I'm just concerned as well about an agenda, perhaps, to push it as something that is advertised, as something that to try and get as many people, to try and sort of seduce people into it, or to try and coerce people into it. Yeah, I don't think it needs to be advertised. I think it should just be a scientific thing, you know, and we need to look at what are the pros and cons, what that can happen to you, what the physics behind it, and what are the social implications behind it too. So I think that's really important. I'm just a bit cautious that it could be seen as something glamorous or something that, you know, in terms of lifestyle choice, you know, like any relationships, there can be good and bad within it. But I don't think it should be sold to people. I don't think there should be any agenda to push it. So that's, you know, I think that is a bit of a concern, I suppose. But I think that's not something necessarily that happens within schools so much. I think that's probably something that happens more general within culture anyway. And I think more generally that we do tend to look at sex as a whole and see the glamorous aspects of it without necessarily seeing also the risks of it too. And how those risks are. And in fact, another good reason for talking about it openly is, of course, some of the other risks, the potential risks of young people being intimidated or being taken advantage of by older adults, by homosexual pederasts, you know, particularly when they're at that young and vulnerable age, 13, 14, 15, your brain is still developing, you haven't met as many people, so you're still learning, you know, what's right and wrong. And of course, you don't have as much money. So, you know, definitely there are older adults who've got lots of money, who may desire to take advantage of youngsters who want to prey on them. And I think for young people, it's really important to know the risks about that. And I think that is very true for young guys, as well as young girls, actually, who are both preyed upon by older men. In fact, they're both potential victims and targets of older men. So that's a really important risk and thing that people need to be able to talk about openly as well. And I think because of the embarrassment behind it, you know, there's a fear of talking about it because it's such a taboo subject as well. And, you know, and so I think people need to be able to talk about it more openly. So I think making youngsters aware of those risks, that they can be more prone to taking advantage of, that they can be seduced by money, by drinks, by drugs, by the lifestyle, and that there may be older people who want to just take advantage of them and use their body. In fact, like many young teenage girls, just the same, really. And I think that they need to be aware of those risks and that happens in society. And we need to be open-eyed about that and clued up and make sure that we help and support other people. And keeping quiet about that is not going to do that, I think, actually. So there are good reasons to talk openly about the risks. And of course, you know, it's a different kind of risk to the paedophile because they're targeting young children who are not probably actively going online. They're not going out to nightclubs. They're not going on meeting people on WhatsApp or on Twitter or on, I don't know, whatever websites. Whereas teenagers do tend to go on Grindr, whatever it is. Teenagers are out there more. They're meeting friends of friends, nightclubs, cafes, wherever's. They're on the internet. And so they are much more prone and at risk. And so it's much more important to talk to them about those risks, you know. And actually, that brings me right down to the gay rights thing, actually, there, of course. that you know, as an older gay male, I think you don't have that. You shouldn't have that right. I mean, legally, you have a right to be with someone once they're 18, I suppose, because they're a bit more mature then. But I think you don't have a right to prey on a younger guy, and you know that is because that younger guy has that right to find other people and to take the time himself or to discover the world in his own time, and to have relationships with other people who are similar to him and on the similar wavelength, at the similar level, and not be taken advantage of by someone. So I think there's definitely an issue within the gay community but that, of course, you know, that's an issue within society as well. You look at the risk of young girls and teenagers preyed upon by older men sometimes. You know, it mirrors, and that's a similar kind of thing really going on there. And so I think, you know, when I went into the gay scene, when I went to gay nightclubs and that, nobody had talked to me about that. I went to a gay youth group who, in fact, were subsidised. They were charity, and they did quite well because they talked about the risks of sexually transmitted diseases, of being drug raped, a lot of risks like that, what violent relationships were like. So various really important topics that they talked about. At no point did they ever mention or discuss the risk of older men taking advantage of you, though. And I think that is a real genuine risk here, that still does go on, actually. I think, you know, once somebody becomes 18, it becomes their legal right, actually, to engage in a relationship like that. I know I've had one like that, and I think that what tends to happen is you use each other. You know, you use them for money, and they use you, they use your body, and you know, you learn that, you know, you make a victim of yourself, you make bad choices in your life, and you regret those things. But I suppose, you know, that's part of life, isn't it, really? And it's a using relationship, and, you know, you feel ashamed for it. But I suppose once you're a young adult, you know, you make those mistakes yourself. But I think in terms of people that are a lot younger than that, especially in their teens, you know, they need to be protected, and they need to be educated and assisted in learning about those risks, I think. And I think those risks, actually, they're all around the world. In fact, you see those in all different cultures, in fact, where there's a risk from younger people, of older people taking advantage of that. So I think there's no wonder that many people do have that concern about young males being preyed on by older males, and young girls too. But it should be said, of course, that, you know, what's concerning there is the pedestry, is the huge age gap, and then there's a large number of homosexuals or bisexuals that have never done that and never engaged with a younger person, or they may have done that and may have regretted it. You know, that's because I don't think for an older person, you know, for my age, like, I wouldn't want to be with someone 20 years younger than me. I just feel like I would want someone about the same level who I could relate to, you know, about the same level of maturity or immaturity sometimes. I would want someone who was that similar to me. But certainly, you know, I can see why it happens. You know, people that are youthful have got that attractiveness about them sometimes. But at the same time, it isn't just about your physical body. You know, there's also the emotional aspect. You know, as you get older, you learn, you know, emotional intelligence. You learn how to be in different situations. You know, you tend to think about things different as you mature older. And I would think an older person would be much more suited and could relate to another older person. But that's, I don't know. I mean, I can understand some age gaps, but I think when someone is that much younger, especially in their teens, I think you have to respect that they're still going through the developmental stages, and they're still especially therefore vulnerable. And I just want to come back to the earlier thing that I touched upon, that in terms of gay rights and gay wrongs, I suppose, I think that we need to be looking at it in a more globalized situation as well, and rather than just looking at what's going on in our own backyard, because there's other areas of the world where people are facing serious prejudice, where people are being beaten up, held captive, or they're forced to live double lives, or they're being imprisoned, tortured, or even killed. And so there are serious human rights abuses going on there. But that being said, it's a difficult subject too, because there are also some gay people that are abusing their rights, that are taking advantage of young, impressionable, vulnerable youth, and that are using them for sex, plying them with drugs or alcohol to get sex often. And there are abusive relationships as well, and so I think, you know, and there are those people that would want to have children, but deny the right of the mother to have access to the child, or to deny the child a right to have its mother, and which seems quite a bizarre thing to want, really, I suppose. But it does make me think, I suppose, if you were to have 2 lesbians and 2 gay men, I don't know if that would... You could perhaps have 4 parents. That might be even better, mightn't it? You certainly have a lot more time devoted to the child there. But, you know, so I don't know if that would perhaps be a solution to that. But I think for me, getting rid of the role of the mother is something that quite rightly a lot of people are deeply concerned about, or equally getting rid of the role of the father. So that kind of is I've exhausted my my talk there. That's basically all I wanted to say, and I think that there's a lot of gay rights and gay wrongs, and that we should support some gay rights, but we should also consider the rights of others, of children, of mothers, of fathers, of young people, and the rights of the whole family. That everybody has rights, and that we can't just think of our own rights, but we also have to consider where those rights might be in conflict, or might come into conflict with other people sometimes. So we have to consider other people's rights as well as our own.